The photographer held our wedding memories hostage. He wanted more money, posted teasers online to taunt us, and smiled like he had already won. He had no idea I had everything I needed to end his career before he even finished his next cup of coffee. Let me take you back to the day it started. Not the wedding day itself, though that was the most important day of my life. I mean the day after the wedding, when everything should have been warm and exhaustion and leftover cake in the fridge. My wife Clara and I had just gotten back from a short 2-night stay at a lake hotel. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet room with a balcony where we watched the water and let the noise of the ceremony fade out of our bones. We came home on a Sunday afternoon, late August, the kind of afternoon where the sunlight is already turning golden and the air smells faintly of cut grass and distant barbecues. The apartment was exactly as we had left it, except for a small stack of wedding cards that a neighbor had collected from our mailbox and left on the kitchen counter. I remember standing in the kitchen, still in the same jeans I had worn at the hotel, reading one of the cards from Clara's aunt. She had written something about love being a daily choice. I thought about that for a moment. Then I made coffee. We had hired the photographer 6 months earlier. His name was Dominic Faber. He ran a solo operation under the brand name Faber Vision, had a clean website with a lot of moody golden hour shots, and came recommended by someone in Clara's office who had used him for an engagement shoot. His packages were not cheap. We had paid for the full day coverage, which included ceremony, reception, getting ready shots, and a promised delivery of edited images within 8 weeks. The total was 2,400 euros. We had paid it in 2 installments, both by bank transfer, both confirmed in writing. The contract was 4 pages long, and I had read every line of it. I want to be clear about that. I read the contract. I am the kind of person who reads contracts, not because I am paranoid, but because I believe that if you are spending a significant amount of money on something that cannot be redone, you should know exactly what you are paying for. Dominic had been present at the wedding for about 9 hours. He was professional that day, or at least he appeared to be. He moved quietly, did not interrupt the ceremony, got the shots of Clara walking down the aisle that her mother had specifically requested, and stayed through the first hour of dancing. His assistant, a young woman named Lena, was there the entire time with a second camera body. Lena was efficient and warm in a way that Dominic was not quite. She had a way of appearing exactly when something was about to happen, which is the mark of someone who actually pays attention. The 8-week window came and went. I sent a polite email at week 9. Dominic replied 2 days later saying the editing process was taking longer than expected due to high summer volume. He apologized, said he would have a preview gallery ready within 2 more weeks. I wrote it in my calendar and waited. 2 more weeks passed. Nothing. I sent another email. This time he replied within hours, which I found interesting. He said the gallery was almost ready, that he was putting finishing touches on the color grading, and that he would send the link by Friday. Friday came. No link. I called him on Saturday morning. He picked up on the 4th ring, and his voice had a particular quality to it that I recognized immediately. It was the voice of someone who has already decided what they're going to say before the phone even rang. Too smooth, too prepared. He told me there had been a software issue, that some files had needed to be reprocessed, but that everything was fine, and the gallery would absolutely be ready by the end of the following week. I said, "Fine, thank you. I appreciate the update." I hung up and sat with the feeling for a moment. Something was not right. I could not name it yet, but it was there, sitting at the edge of the conversation like a shadow just outside the frame. Clara came into the living room and asked how it went. I told her what he had said. She accepted it with the kind of patient optimism she tends to bring to situations I am already suspicious of. She said, "Well, at least they are coming." I nodded, but I opened my laptop and went to Dominic Faber's Instagram page. He had posted 2 days earlier. The post was a set of 3 teaser images, clearly from a recent wedding. The lighting, the style, the angles, all of it matched what I had seen him doing at our wedding. The caption read, "Beautiful memories from a summer ceremony. Full gallery coming soon for this lovely couple. Reminder to all inquiring clients. Quality takes time and memories have their price." I read that last sentence twice. Memories have their price. I took a screenshot. I did not say anything to Clara yet. I went back to his website and looked at his booking calendar. He had a listing for the regional wedding fair, the Hochzeitsmesse, which was held every November at the convention center, about 20 minutes from our apartment. He was listed as a premium exhibitor. That fair attracted several hundred couples every year, all of them in the early stages of planning, all of them looking for vendors. For a solo photographer with a premium brand, that fair was worth thousands of euros in future bookings. It was the kind of event where your image mattered more than anything you could say. I noted the date, November 14th. The following week came and went without a gallery link. I sent an email on Monday, no reply. I sent another on Thursday, no reply. I called on Friday afternoon, and the call went to voicemail. I left a calm, factual message. My name, our wedding date, the contract reference number, and the request to please confirm the delivery timeline. He called back on Sunday evening. Clara and I were eating dinner. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. His voice had changed. The smooth preparation was gone. In its place was something harder, more deliberate. He said he had been reviewing the project and that due to the extended scope of the edit and some additional post-processing work he had done, he would need to charge a supplemental fee before releasing the gallery. He said the amount was 600 euros. I stood in the hallway with the phone against my ear and the smell of dinner coming from the kitchen, and I said, "I am sorry, can you repeat that?" He repeated it, 600 euros. He said the work had exceeded what was included in the original package, that the reception lighting had required significant correction, and that the number of delivered images would exceed the contracted minimum by a meaningful margin. I said, the contract specifies a minimum of 400 edited images with no cap on additional images at no additional charge. I said, the contract also specifies that any change to the agreed fee must be submitted in writing before the additional work is performed. He paused. Then he said, the contract is a general framework, and these things are sometimes negotiated after the fact in the industry. I said, that is not what the contract says. He said, I understand your position, but I will not be releasing the gallery until the supplemental fee is settled. There it was, clean and simple. He was holding our wedding photographs hostage. I said, I will be in touch, and I ended the call. I went back to the kitchen. I sat down. I picked up my fork. Clara looked at me, and I told her exactly what had happened. She went very still in the way she does when something genuinely surprises her. Then she said, he can't do that, can he? I said, no, he cannot. I want to explain something about what happened next, because it is important. I did not call a lawyer that night. I did not post anything online. I did not send an angry email or leave a review or call his phone back. I finished my dinner, I helped clear the table, and then I went to the filing cabinet in the second bedroom, the one we use as a home office, and I pulled out the folder I had labeled with the photographer's name 6 months earlier. Inside that folder was the signed contract, both pages initialed, and the final page signed by Dominic Faber in blue ink. There were the 2 bank transfer confirmations, both showing the exact amounts, the dates, and the reference numbers. There was the email chain from the original booking, including his confirmation that the package covered full-day coverage, a minimum of 400 images, and no additional fees beyond the agreed total. And there was something else. Lena, the assistant, had been meticulous about her own records. I had not known this at the time, but about 3 weeks after the wedding, I had received a brief, friendly email from her. She said she had worked with Dominic for about 8 months and that she was moving on to start her own work. She said she wanted to let me know that she had backed up all the raw files from our wedding to her own external drive as part of her standard workflow, and that if we ever had any issues receiving the final gallery, she would be happy to provide a copy of the raws directly. She said she hoped our day had been everything we wanted it to be. I had replied thanking her and saved that email in the folder. I had not thought about it again until that moment in the home office with the folder open on the desk. I sat at the desk and read her email again. Then I wrote her a short reply asking if her offer still stood and whether she would be willing to discuss the situation. She replied the next morning. She said yes, the offer stood. She said she was not surprised to hear from me. She said she had left Dominic's operation in part because of exactly this kind of situation. She said she had the full set of raw files on a drive and would be happy to provide them if it came to that. She also said, carefully and without being asked, that she had documentation of the original shooting schedule, the file count, and the delivery expectations as discussed internally, and that none of it supported the idea of a supplemental charge. I thanked her and asked her to hold on to everything for now. I then spent 2 evenings reading the Consumer Protection Guidelines for service contracts in Germany, specifically around the withholding of contracted deliverables pending payment of fees not agreed in the original contract. I am not a lawyer, but I can read, and what I read was clear enough. What Dominic was doing was not a gray area. He had received full payment. He was withholding the contracted deliverable. The supplemental fee he was demanding had no basis in the signed agreement. He was, in plain terms, in breach of contract. I drafted a formal letter. I used precise language. I cited the contract clauses. I referenced the payment dates and amounts. I set a deadline of 14 days for delivery of the complete gallery as contracted. I stated that failure to deliver within that period would result in legal action, including a claim for breach of contract, a formal complaint to the relevant Consumer Protection Authority, and a detailed public account of the situation on every relevant platform. I sent the letter by email with a read receipt and also by registered post. He read the email within the hour. I know because the read receipt came back. He did not reply. 5 days later, he posted again on Instagram. This time, the post was more pointed. It was a photograph of a camera bag, dramatically lit, with a caption that read, "The art of wedding photography is a craft, not a commodity. When clients expect luxury results at budget prices, something has to give. I choose to protect my work and my worth. Not everyone will understand that, and that's okay." The comments were mostly supportive, from other photographers and from people who did not know the context. A few people tagged friends who were getting married. One person asked about his availability for the following spring. I screenshotted the post. Clara saw it that evening, and her expression shifted from patience into something quieter and harder. She said, "He is performing for his audience while ignoring your letter." I said yes. She said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "We are going to wait until the 14 days are up, and then we are going to do exactly what the letter said we would do." She looked at me for a moment, and then she said, "Okay." And she meant it. The 14 days expired on a Wednesday. No gallery, no communication, nothing. I filed a formal complaint with the Consumer Protection Authority that same afternoon. I attached the contract, the payment confirmations, the email chain, the letter I had sent, and the read receipt showing he had received it. I noted the Instagram posts as evidence of continued commercial activity during the period of non-delivery. I also contacted a local consumer rights attorney for a brief consultation. He confirmed my reading of the situation and said the case was straightforward. He offered to send a formal demand letter on his letterhead if I wanted, which I did. That letter went out the following Monday. Dominic called me the day after the attorney's letter arrived. His voice was different again. The hardness was still there, but underneath it was something new, a kind of controlled alarm. He said he had received a letter from a lawyer and that he felt this had escalated beyond what was necessary. He said he was willing to release the gallery without the supplemental fee if we could agree to drop the complaint. I said, "The complaint has already been filed. It cannot simply be dropped by agreement between us." I said, "What you can do is deliver the gallery as contracted. The legal process will proceed on its own timeline." He said, "That is not how I expected this to go." I said, "I know." I said, "The gallery, please, within 5 business days." He hung up. He did not deliver the gallery. I want to pause here and tell you about the wedding fair, because that is where this story reaches the moment I had been quietly preparing for since that first Sunday night in the hallway. The Hochzeitsmesse was 11 days away. Dominic Faber had a premium booth, a 10 square meter space with a printed backdrop, a display screen showing a slideshow of his work, and a table with a branded portfolio book and a stack of business cards. He had paid for that space months in advance. He had promoted his attendance on his website and social media. He was planning to spend the day presenting himself as a high-end professional to hundreds of couples who were about to make significant spending decisions. I had been to this fair before, 2 years earlier, when Clara and I were just beginning to plan. I knew the layout. I knew that the photography section was near the entrance, in a high-traffic corridor where almost every attendee would pass at least once. I knew that the vendors there relied on in-person impressions, on the warmth of the interaction, on the credibility of their display. I also knew that the fair had a public area where attendees could leave feedback, and that several of the local wedding planning blogs covered the event with post-fair roundups that vendors actively courted for positive mentions. I did not go to the fair to make a scene. I want to be clear about that. I went to the fair because I had a right to be there as a member of the public, and because I had a story to tell to anyone who asked. Clara came with me. She wore a light gray coat and carried a small tote bag. I wore a dark jacket and carried a folder. Inside the folder was a printed copy of the contract, the payment confirmations, the attorney's letter, and a one-page summary of the situation written in plain, factual language that anyone could read in about 90 seconds. We arrived at 10 in the morning, about 40 minutes after the doors opened. The hall was already busy. There was the particular kind of energy that comes with engaged couples, excited and slightly overwhelmed, moving from booth to booth with brochures in their hands, and the slightly dazed look of people who have just discovered how many decisions go into a single day. We found Dominic's booth in the 3rd row of the photography section. He was standing behind his table, talking to a young couple. His display screen was running a slow slideshow of his best work. The portfolio book was open on the table. He had a small bowl of branded mints next to the business cards. He looked exactly like someone who had spent money on looking successful. He did not see us immediately. We stood at the edge of the aisle and I watched him work. He was good at this part, the pitch. He had a way of leaning forward slightly when he spoke, creating a sense of intimacy and focus. He laughed at something the young man said. He pointed to a photograph on the screen and said something about the light. Then he looked up and saw me. His face did something complicated. The smile stayed in place, but everything behind it changed. His eyes moved from me to Clara, then to the folder under my arm, then back to my face. I gave him a small nod. Nothing more. The couple at his booth finished their conversation and moved on. Dominic took a half step toward us and said, in a low voice, "This is not the place for this." I said, "We are just here as visitors." He said, "I know what you are doing." I said, "We are looking at vendors, same as everyone else." A new couple had stopped at the edge of his booth, looking at the display screen. Dominic glanced at them, then back at me. He was caught between two audiences, and he knew it. The new couple, a woman with short dark hair and her partner, stepped closer and began leafing through the portfolio book. The woman looked up and asked Dominic how far in advance he typically booked up. Dominic turned to answer her, and I stepped to the side of the booth, not blocking it, not interfering, just present. Clara stood beside me. The woman asked about the delivery timeline for edited photos. Dominic said, "Typically 6 to 8 weeks." The woman nodded and said, "We have heard some photographers take much longer. Is that ever an issue?" Dominic said, "I have a strong track record of on-time delivery." I said quietly but clearly. From where I was standing, our wedding was in August. It is now November. We have not received our photographs. The woman turned to look at me. Her partner did too. Dominic said, "This gentleman has a personal situation that is currently being handled." I said, "I have a signed contract, full payment records, and a letter from my attorney." I said, "If you are considering booking with this vendor, I would be happy to share the documentation." I said it calmly. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse him of anything beyond what I could document. Dominic said, "You need to leave my booth." I said, "I am standing in a public aisle at a public event." I said, "I am not at your booth." The woman with the short dark hair looked at Dominic and then at me. She said, "Can I see the documentation?" I opened the folder and handed her the one-page summary. She read it. Her partner read it over her shoulder. They were quiet for a moment. Dominic said, "That is a completely one-sided account of a contract dispute." The woman said, "It has a contract number and payment dates on it." She handed it back to me. She said thank you, and she and her partner walked away from the booth without taking a business card. Over the next 2 hours, something happened that I had not fully planned, but had not been surprised by either. People talk at wedding fairs. The couples move in circuits. They stop at the same booths. They share impressions in the aisles. Word moved, not like a wildfire, more like water finding its level. By midday, there were clusters of people who had seen or heard something about the photographer in booth 37, and some of them came to find me to ask what had happened. I told them the same thing each time. I showed them the one-page summary. I showed them the contract. I did not editorialize. I did not call them names. I said, "This is what the contract says. This is what I paid. This is what I have received so far, and this is where the legal process currently stands." 2 other couples, independently of each other, told me they had also experienced delays with Dominic, though neither had faced the explicit demand for additional payment. One of them said she had left a review on a wedding planning platform, but had not felt confident enough to say too much because she had not had documentation. I gave both of them the attorney's contact information. At around 1 in the afternoon, Dominic left his booth. He did not come back. A sign appeared on the table saying he had stepped out temporarily, but the booth remained empty for the rest of the day. His display screen kept running the slideshow, which somehow made it worse for him. All that beautiful work, playing on a loop, with no one there to explain it. I heard later from someone who worked at the fair that he had gone to the organizer's office to complain about me. The organizer had reviewed the situation and determined that I had not violated any policy, as I had not distributed materials at another vendor's booth, had not made false statements, and had not disrupted the event. They had told him there was nothing they could do. Clara and I had lunch at a small cafe near the convention center. She had a bowl of soup and I had a sandwich, and we sat by the window and did not say very much for a while. She reached across the table at one point and put her hand on mine and said, "I just want to see the pictures." I said, "I know." I said, "We will." The consequences for Dominic Faber unfolded over the following weeks in a way that was, I think, proportionate to what he had done. The Consumer Protection Authority completed its initial review and sent him a formal notice of the complaint. The attorney's demand letter created a legal record that he could not simply ignore. 3 couples who had been considering booking him for the following year's wedding season either did not book or actively canceled inquiries after the fair. I know this because 2 of them contacted me directly to say so. His Instagram following dropped modestly, which sounds small until you understand that for a solo photographer whose entire marketing strategy was built on social proof, even a moderate loss of credibility in the local market was significant. More importantly, 2 of the local wedding planning blogs that covered the fair published roundups that did not include him, despite his premium booth status. One of them, when I reached out to ask why, said simply that they had received multiple reports of concerns and had decided to err on the side of caution. He posted one more time on Instagram, about a week after the fair. The post was a photograph of a camera lens, and the caption said something about navigating difficult clients and maintaining professionalism. The comments were different this time. Several people asked pointed questions. A few tagged others. He deleted the post within 48 hours. And then, on a Thursday evening about 3 weeks after the fair, I received an email from Dominic Faber. It was 4 sentences long. It said he was releasing the full gallery as contracted. It said the link was attached. It said he considered the matter closed. It said he wished us well. I clicked the link. The gallery loaded slowly, one image at a time, and I sat at the desk in the home office with my hands in my lap and watched our wedding appear on the screen. I want to tell you what that was like, because I think it is the part of this story that matters most. There was a photograph of Clara getting ready, sitting in front of a mirror in the hotel room where she had prepared with her sister and 2 friends. The light was coming through a thin curtain, and it fell across her shoulder in a way that looked like something from a painting. She was laughing at something, her head tilted slightly, her hand still holding the earring she had been about to put on. I had not been in that room that morning. I had not seen that moment, and yet there it was, preserved perfectly, exactly as it had happened. There was a photograph of my father standing outside the ceremony venue, straightening his tie, looking at the ground with an expression I recognized as the one he wears when he is trying not to cry. He would deny it if you asked him. But there it was. There was a photograph of Clara and me at the exact moment the officiant said the words that made us married. We were looking at each other, and we were both, very slightly, smiling, and we were both, very slightly, about to cry. I do not remember that moment from the inside. I remember it as a blur of warmth and noise and the smell of the flowers on the altar. But from the outside, from where Lena had been standing with her second camera body, it looked exactly like what it was. I called Clara into the room, and she sat beside me, and we went through the gallery together, slowly, for about 2 hours. At some point, she said, "They are beautiful." I said, "They are." She said, "He was actually good at the job." I said, "Yes, he was good at the job. He was just not good at being a person." She laughed a little at that. I want to say something about Lena, because she deserves to be in this story properly. I wrote her a long email after we received the gallery. I told her what had happened and what her offer of backup files had meant, not just practically, but as a kind of security, a knowledge that even if the worst happened, we would not lose everything. I told her that her early email had been one of the reasons I had stayed calm throughout the whole situation, because I had known from the beginning that we had a fallback. She replied and said she was glad it had worked out. She said she had started her own photography business and that she was booking her first weddings for the following year. She sent me a link to her portfolio. We recommended her to 3 couples we knew who were getting married the following summer. All 3 of them booked her. I also want to say something about the contract, because that 4-page document is, in a way, the real protagonist of this story. Not me, not Dominic, not even Clara. The contract. Printed, initialed, signed in blue ink by a man who thought it was a formality. It was not a formality. It was a record of what had been agreed between 2 people at a moment when they were both acting in good faith. And it was the thing that made everything else possible. The payment records mattered. The emails mattered. Lena's backup mattered. But the contract was the foundation. If you take one thing from this story, let it be that. Read the contract, keep the contract, file the contract somewhere you'll be able to find it on a Sunday night when you are standing in a hallway with a phone against your ear and the smell of dinner coming from the kitchen and the feeling that something is very wrong. Dominic Faber's premium listing on the regional wedding fair website was not renewed the following year. His Instagram account went quiet sometime around February. His website is still live as of the last time I checked, but the booking calendar has not been updated in months, and the inquiry form appears to no longer be functional. I do not feel satisfaction about that exactly. I feel something more like the absence of a weight I had been carrying without fully noticing. The way you feel when a low-grade headache finally stops and you realize you had forgotten what it felt like not to have one. We printed 12 photographs from the gallery. They are framed and distributed across the apartment in the places where they belong. The one of Clara laughing with the earring is on the dresser in our bedroom. The one of my father straightening his tie is in the hallway. The one of the moment we became married is in the living room, on the wall above the small table where we keep our keys. Every time I come home and put my keys on that table, I see it. I do not think about Dominic Faber when I see it. I think about Clara and the light through the curtain and the way my father looked at the ground so he would not cry, and the fact that all of it is ours now, fully and permanently, exactly as it should have been from the beginning. We got our memories back, and the only photographers we recommend now are the ones who understand that the work is not about them.